You might think you're just not talented enough, that other people have something you don't, that they somehow reach mastery while you keep stopping one step short. You've learned things, you've tried, you've practiced, you've even gotten pretty good more than once. But deep down, there's this quiet frustration, the feeling that you never truly mastered anything, that no matter how much effort you put in, you stay on the surface, competent, but not exceptional, busy, but not dangerous, capable, but not undeniable. And over time, that starts to hurt your confidence. You begin to wonder if something is wrong with you, if maybe you waited too long, if maybe real mastery just isn't for people like you. But here's the truth most people never hear. You're not untalented. You're not too old. You're not missing discipline. You're just unfocused in a very specific, invisible way. And once you understand how this works, everything about learning, progress, and mastery starts to make sense. This book is about why most people never master anything, even though they work hard, stay busy, and keep trying. And more importantly, how some people quietly become exceptionally good. Not by doing more, but by doing something fundamentally different. Before we talk about mastery, we need to clear away one dangerous illusion. Most people believe that becoming truly good at something is about talent, motivation, discipline, or willpower. They think mastery is reserved for the gifted, the obsessed, or the lucky. That belief quietly destroys progress. Because if you think mastery is something you either have or don't, you stop looking for the actual mechanism behind it. You blame yourself instead of the system you were taught to follow. The truth is, most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they spread their effort in ways that feel productive, but never create depth. They learn too wide. They switch too early. They chase improvement without direction, and over time, that pattern becomes invisible, even to them. In the first chapter, we're going to expose the exact reason why hard work so often leads to mediocrity, why constant learning can make you worse instead of better, and why real mastery almost always looks boring from the outside. Once you see this clearly, you'll never approach skill, learning, or progress the same way again. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why effort alone never creates mastery. You think you're not trying hard enough, that if you just pushed a little more, stayed disciplined a bit longer, or found the right motivation, something inside you would finally click and mastery would follow. But what if the problem isn't the amount of effort you're putting in? What if it's the invisible way that effort gets scattered across a dozen half-finished pursuits, leaving you competent everywhere but exceptional nowhere? Busy every day, but never truly dangerous in anything that matters. Imagine spending 15 years reading books on leadership, taking courses in public speaking, experimenting with productivity systems, even starting a side hustle or two. And at the end of it all, looking back to realize you can talk a good game about a lot of things, but can't deliver elite results in any one of them. That's exactly what happened to Ray Kroc when he was in his early 50s, already running a small milkshake mixer business that barely kept him afloat after decades of sales jobs and failed ventures that went nowhere. Most people remember him as the guy who turned McDonald's into a global empire practically overnight. But the truth is, he didn't discover the restaurant until he was 52. And what made him different wasn't some burst of genius or endless hustle. It was his quiet obsession with perfecting one single operation. The absolute basics of making a burger and fries exactly the same way every single time. No matter the location, no matter the chaos around him. While others chased bigger menus, flashier locations, or trendy expansions that promised quick wins, Kroc spent years literally years, drilling down into the mundane fundamentals of speed, consistency, and quality control, until that one system became unbreakable, turning a roadside stand into something unstoppable, not through talent, but through relentless depth in the simplest elements. And here's the part most people miss. He wasn't younger or smarter than the thousands who tried and failed before him. He was just willing to look average, even boring, for a very long time while building something others couldn't touch. But hold that thought for a moment, because understanding why Ray succeeded starts with seeing the trap that catches almost everyone else. The modern myth that mastery comes from learning widely, trying everything, and stacking skills like trophies on a shelf. You know exactly how this feels. You read a book on investing and suddenly want to master the stock market. Then a podcast on writing convinces you to start a blog. A TED Talk on languages has you downloading Duolingo. And before you know it, your calendar is filled with good intentions, but your brain never settles long enough to wire any one skill deeply into automatic excellence. This isn't laziness or lack of discipline. It's your brain doing what evolution designed it to do. Chasing novelty for survival in a world where new opportunities once meant food or safety. Releasing dopamine every time you start something fresh while quietly starving. The deeper neural pathways that only form through thousands of focused repetitions on the same fundamental actions. Think about how this plays out in your own life right now. Those moments when you get pretty good at something. Feel that first rush of competence. And then the excitement fades because your attention drifts to the next interesting thing, leaving you with surface-level knowledge that feels productive in the moment, but leaves you frustrated years later when nothing has truly stuck. Neuroscientists call this the breadth bias, where constant switching prevents myelin from building, that insulating sheath around your neurons that turns effortful practice into effortless mastery. The same process that lets a concert pianist play complex pieces without thinking or a surgeon make life-saving cuts on instinct. Without depth, your brain stays in novice mode forever. Competent enough to get by, but never reaching the quiet dominance where obstacles melt away because you've internalized the basics so completely, they become your unfair advantage. And the worst part? This pattern feels like progress. All those courses, books, and starts create a comforting illusion of growth. Until you compare yourself to someone who's quietly exceptional in one area, and suddenly the gap feels impossible to close. You probably think this sounds familiar, maybe even obvious. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people never connect the dots between their scattered efforts and the mediocrity that follows, because the culture around us rewards width over depth, celebrating the polymath who dabbles brilliantly while ignoring the quiet specialist who outlasts everyone through sheer accumulation of focused hours. Ray Kroc didn't invent a revolutionary burger. He mastered the unglamorous basics of assembly line precision until competitors couldn't match his consistency. And that depth came not from talent, but from refusing to chase the next shiny idea until the current one was unbreakable. Your brain craves this too. It takes roughly 10,000 hours of deliberate practice on core fundamentals to reach world-class levels. But those hours must cluster around a single domain, or they evaporate into nothing, which explains why hard workers everywhere stay average, while a few become untouchable through nothing more mysterious than sustained attention on fewer things. Now imagine what happens when you reverse this. When you identify the one skill where pretty good already exists and pour every ounce of that scattered energy into its three most essential building blocks until they operate on autopilot, transforming competent into commanding without burning out or needing superhuman willpower. That's the shift from busy surface learning to quiet depth, where progress accelerates because your brain finally gets the signal to build those mile-in highways instead of paving 1,000 gravel roads that lead nowhere. But knowing this mechanism isn't enough on its own, because even when you see the problem clearly and want to change, there's one critical mistake almost everyone makes in those first crucial weeks that sends them right back to scattering their attention. Here's what you do today, not tomorrow, not when life calms down. Take 15 minutes right now and write down 3 skills where you've reached that pretty good level. The ones where people compliment you sometimes, but you know deep down you're not exceptional yet. Next to each one, ask yourself these 3 questions. Does this light me up enough to commit for 2 years without guarantees? Can I break it into 3 core fundamentals I could practice daily for 20 minutes? And most importantly, am I willing to let go of the other 2 completely right now to give this one the depth it deserves? Circle the winner. Then spend 10 minutes today breaking it into those 3 basics. If it's public speaking, maybe it's breath control, vocal projection, and pausing for impact. And practice just one for 20 focused minutes before the day ends. You'll feel the difference immediately. That subtle click when your brain senses the depth signal and starts rewiring. But don't stop there, because the real test comes next. That small action plants the seed of quiet mastery, the kind that compounds silently while others chase the next trend. But choosing your path only works if you can protect it from the distractions waiting to pull you away. And that's exactly what most people miss in those fragile first 90 days when everything inside screams to switch again. Let's talk about how to make that choice stick in the chapter ahead. Chapter 2. The invisible cost of learning too wide. Imagine looking back over the last 10 years of your life and realizing that all those books you read, courses you took, skills you sampled, every bit of effort poured into becoming a better version of yourself, somehow added up to 0 true expertise, leaving you with a shelf full of half-understood ideas, but no single area where you stand head and shoulders above everyone else. You feel productive in the moment, even accomplished as you mark off completed modules or share insights from the latest podcast. But deep down, there's this nagging sense that width without depth is just a prettier form of staying stuck. A way to look busy while quietly ensuring you'll never become exceptional at anything that truly matters to you. What if that familiar cycle of starting strong and drifting away isn't a personal failure at all? What if it's the hidden cost of a system designed to keep you learning wide, but never diving deep enough to change your life? That's precisely the path Sam Walton walked in his mid-40s, when he could have coasted on a solid career managing retail stores for others, jumping from one opportunity to the next as promotions came and went. But instead, he made a different choice. Walking away from corporate security at age 44 to focus obsessively on one radical idea. Everyday low prices in rural America through a discount store model nobody else believed in. While competitors spread their attention across urban markets, fancy merchandising, and promotional gimmicks that promised quick sales spikes, Walton dug into the unglamorous basics of supply chain efficiency, store layout simplicity, and relentless price comparison until those elements formed an unbreakable competitive edge, turning a single store in Bentonville into Walmart's foundation, not through flashy innovation, but through years of narrowing his world to perfecting discount retail fundamentals. And here's something most people overlook. He didn't succeed because he was a retail genius from birth. He succeeded because he resisted the temptation to diversify or chase trends, committing to one path long after others had moved on to shinier prospects. But wait. There's a reason this feels so counterintuitive. A reason why even smart, driven people like you end up trapped in the cycle of wide learning that promises everything, but delivers mediocrity. And it starts with understanding how your brain betrays you in the most innocent way possible. Picture this. You're scrolling through recommendations late at night. Stumble on a course about digital marketing that lights you up. Enroll immediately because it feels like the missing piece to your business puzzle. Dive in for a week with real excitement building as concepts click. And then, almost without noticing, your attention shifts to a new newsletter about leadership or a video on time management because novelty hits that same reward center every single time, flooding your system with dopamine that feels just like progress, even though you're diluting your focus across too many fronts to ever build real momentum. This isn't a willpower problem or some moral failing. It's your ancient brain wired for survival in a hunter-gatherer world where sampling new berries or paths increase chances of finding food, now hijacked by modern abundance, where every app, book, and idea triggers the exact same hit, quietly eroding the sustained repetition needed for myelin to form and turn conscious effort into unconscious excellence. You feel this pull every day, don't you? That subtle shift from deep work on one skill to flitting between emails, social feeds, and quick-win podcasts that keep you informed but never transformed, creating what psychologists call the illusion of explanatory depth, where you believe you understand a dozen subjects well enough to teach them but crumble under real scrutiny because surface exposure never builds the neural scaffolding for true command. The cost compounds invisibly over time. FOMO, that fear of missing out, convinces you every new opportunity might be the one. So you sample broadly. Instead of specializing narrowly, your calendar fills with fragmented 15-minute sessions that feel efficient but starve the deeper circuits. And years later, you wonder why you're still competent across the board but dominant in nothing, watching others lap you through nothing more than stubborn commitment to fewer pursuits. Your brain loves this arrangement because starting fresh always feels easier than grinding through plateaus. But that short-term comfort exacts a devastating long-term price. Perpetual averageness, disguised as versatility. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This wide learning trap doesn't just waste time. It actively makes you worse at mastery because constant context switching taxes your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for sustained focus, leaving less cognitive fuel for the deliberate practice that separates good from great, while reinforcing a habit of premature optimization where you chase diminishing returns on too many fronts instead of compounding gains on one. Sam Walton didn't conquer retail by studying every trend or trying every model. He narrowed to discount basics and iterated them mercilessly until variables like vendor negotiations and inventory turnover became second nature, creating economies of scale others couldn't replicate because they spread their bets instead of stacking their depth. Now think about your own scattered pursuits for a second. All those apps, books, and experiments adding breadth without building the automaticity that lets experts operate in flow states where time disappears and output skyrockets. And realize that the real cost isn't lost hours, but forfeited dominance. The quiet tragedy of knowing a little about a lot, while knowing nothing deeply enough to change your trajectory. But understanding this dopamine-driven illusion of progress changes everything if you act on it right now. Because seeing the trap clearly gives you power to escape it. Starting with a simple 7-day audit that exposes exactly how your attention fractures and where to reclaim it for depth. Here's exactly what you do today. Before another distraction pulls you away, grab a notebook or open a notes app, and for the next 7 days, track every time your focus shifts from your chosen skill to something new. Every notification checked. Every unrelated video watched, every conversation that veers off topic, jot it down without judgment just to see the pattern emerge like fog lifting from a landscape you thought you knew. On day 3, review the list and circle the top 3 thieves of your attention. Maybe social media rabbit holes or email pings or that endless news feed. Then create one non-negotiable rule for each, like phone in another room during practice blocks or browser extensions that block sites for 90 minutes. Enforcing it ruthlessly because those first days will test you. But the clarity on day 7 will shock you into realizing how much depth waits when width retreats. You'll notice the shift immediately. Longer stretches of flow, faster skill uptake, that subtle brain hum signaling myelin in motion. But don't celebrate yet, because narrowing your learning only works when you pick the right path to pour it into. That audit reveals the invisible leaks draining your potential, setting the stage for a focused choice that sticks. But even with clarity, most people stumble right at the selection step, choosing not what excites them most today, but what feels safest or trendiest, which leads straight back to distraction and dropout. Let's uncover how to choose your one quiet path correctly in the chapter ahead. Chapter 3. How to choose your one quiet path. What if the biggest mistake people make after seeing the trap of scattered learning isn't failing to focus? It's choosing the wrong thing to focus on, pouring years of quiet effort into a skill that lights someone else up, but leaves you grinding through days without that inner pull toward mastery that turns discipline into devotion, making every session feel like a chore rather than a quiet unfolding of something uniquely yours. You know this feeling all too well. Standing at a crossroads with 3 promising paths ahead, each one backed by logic or market trends or friends' success stories who swear it's the future. Picking the smart one because it promises security or status or that elusive 6-figure freedom, only to discover 6 months later that motivation evaporated because it never truly aligned with what makes your pulse quicken. Time disappear, and small efforts compound into private victories that fuel you through the inevitable rough patches. And for those of us in our 40s or beyond, this choice carries extra weight, the fear whispering that time is shorter now, that starting deep on one path means closing doors forever on all the others. When the truth whispers back that narrowing late often creates sharper results than spreading wide ever did, because life has already taught you what doesn't fit. Consider Laura Ingalls Wilder, who spent her first 60 years in a blur of frontier farming, school teaching, chicken raising, and scribbling newspaper columns that barely paid the grocery bills, jumping from practical necessity to necessity without ever settling into one creative lane that felt like home. Then at 65, when most women her age were knitting grandchildren's sweaters or tending victory gardens, she sat down to write what became Little House on the Prairie, the first book in a series that sold millions and defined American childhood for generations. But only because she finally stopped chasing practical gigs or trendy magazine topics and committed to one quiet path, telling simple, unvarnished stories from her prairie childhood exactly as she remembered them. Honing that single voice through years of rejection, slips and rewrites until every detail breathed authenticity. While younger writers in the 1930s flitted between romance novels, detective stories, and social realism hunting for publishers' favor, Wilder narrowed relentlessly to personal memoir fundamentals, authentic sensory detail that put you in the dugout house smelling cornbread baking, rhythmic prose that rolled like wagon wheels across plains, emotional truth stripped of sentimentality, ignoring the commercial formulas or literary fads that might have diluted her singular strength. That depth at such a late start didn't just succeed because of timing or luck. It endured across decades and adaptations because she chose what fit her quietly instead of what looked impressive on a bookshelf or promised quicker sales. Most people miss this entirely. They remember her as a lucky late bloomer discovered by chance, not someone who traded the illusion of versatility for the rare power of one perfectly aligned path pursued without apology or diversification. But here's what nobody tells you about making this choice right now in your own life at this exact stage. It's not about finding white-hot passion first or waiting for some cosmic sign of perfect clarity that never arrives. It's about running a simple, brutally honest test that reveals quiet fit. The kind of alignment where effort feels sustainable over years because it taps something deeper than fleeting excitement, external validation, or the latest LinkedIn hot take on future-proof careers. Think back over the last year or two. Which of your pretty good skills made 3 hours vanish without boredom creeping in? Where feedback from others, a colleague's offhand, "You explain that better than anyone," or a client's repeat business, matched your private sense of untapped potential, and where small wins compounded into quiet confidence rather than one-off highs followed by motivational crashes and guilt. Your brain already knows the answer because evolution favored specialists who doubled down on what worked in their environmental niche. The berry picker who mastered one thicket, the tool maker who perfected one stone shape, instead of generalists who sampled everywhere and mastered nothing. So the same ancient wiring responds instantly to quiet fit signals like intrinsic pull that shortens perceived time, natural progress acceleration where plateaus feel shorter and shallower, reduced mental friction where decisions flow without second-guessing, and that subtle body language of energy, upright posture, steady breathing. Your physiology betrays excitement before your mind admits it. The 80-20 rule sharpens this further. 80% of eventual mastery flows from mastering 20% of that skill's core fundamentals. So choosing wrong means wasting 80% of your precious future hours you don't have to waste in your 40s or 50s, on fundamental misalignment, while the right path multiplies, returns through compounding depth that feels easier every month. You probably feel a knot tightening right now in your chest or stomach. That inner voice saying it's too late to pivot decisively at your age. That others started younger, with clearer innate gifts, or family support structures you never had. When nothing could be further from the truth, because late choosers often win bigger and faster. Decades of life experience sharpen judgment like a blade, filter out shiny distractions that ensnared your 20s, add hard-won wisdom that turns good skills into resonant expertise others pay dearly for, and provide the emotional stability to endure plateaus without crumbling. Narrowing feels risky, even foolish, because culture glorifies the multipotentialite juggling podcasts, side gigs, and personal brands across platforms. But those breadth chasers rarely dominate anything meaningful, while quiet specialists quietly lap them through sustained depth on one vector. The vascular surgeon who masters aneurysm repairs after broad general practice. The commercial negotiator who perfects consultative closing after retail exposure. The financial advisor who owns retirement planning after general sales wandering. Without this deliberate choice grounded in quiet fit, you drift back to wide sampling disguised as noble exploration or prudent diversification. With it, every practice session feeds momentum instead of fragmenting energy into exhausting parallel tracks, creating that flywheel effect where small daily inputs on aligned fundamentals yield exponential outputs precisely when others burn out and quit. Hold that thought through one more layer. Because testing quiet fit isn't just intuitive guesswork. It's pattern recognition. Your mature brain excels at now more than ever, scanning past evidence like a seasoned detective instead of the 20-something optimist chasing every lead. Narrow choosers bypass the common traps too. They don't pick prestige skills like coding or crypto trading because influencers scream future-proof, ignoring whether those align with their wiring. They skip safe bets like management consulting that pay steadily but drain creatively. They avoid childhood dreams resurrected for nostalgia that no longer fit adult reality. Instead, quiet fit emerges where past micro-successes cluster. The writing where editors asked for more unprompted. The teaching moments where rooms hung on unplanned stories. The analysis where complex data clarified under your hands. Signals your neurology screams, "Double down here," while ego whispers, "But it's not sexy enough." Now let's turn that recognition into traction with 3 precise questions that cut through noise like a scalpel. Because theory without action evaporates. But these spark immediate clarity. Here's what you do today, right now, before doubt or busyness creeps back in to blur the signal. Take 10 minutes with pen and paper or voice notes if writing feels heavy. List those top 3 pretty good skills from Chapter 1, where compliments came naturally. Then answer these exact 3 questions next to each one slowly and without self-deception. Rating 1 to 10 for honest gut response. First, does pursuing this make 3 hours feel like 30 minutes without forcing excitement, clock watching, or that creeping dread of, "I should be doing something more productive"? Second, reviewing your last real efforts here over 6 months. Did natural strengths emerge repeatedly that others noticed before you did? The clients, "Explain it again like that." The teams, "You always see the angle we miss." Hinting at untapped depth waiting to compound exponentially? Third, and most crucially, strip away guarantees, and can you picture yourself happily iterating its core fundamentals daily for 2 full years straight? Through inevitable plateaus, life interruptions, competitor wins elsewhere. Because it aligns with who you are becoming rather than who society, family, or algorithms think you should become. Total the scores. Circle the highest scorer unequivocally as your quiet path, the one scoring 40 or above. Then speak it out loud right now with commitment. For the next 90 days minimum, I choose skill name. And its 3 core fundamentals exclusively, letting all others go completely. Before bed tonight, spend 5 focused minutes visualizing tomorrow's first 20-minute session in vivid detail. Feel the chair, hear the silence, sense the flow state unlocking. Because that rehearsal cements neural pathways while silencing the inner committee forever arguing for just one more option. You'll wake tomorrow with direction sharper than a lifetime of wondering, that subtle shift from scattered to sovereign. But true choice only endures if you survive the brutal first 90 days when distractions, doubts, and dopamine traps scream loudest to abandon ship. That voiced commitment plants your flag on one path with power most never access or sustain. But 90% falter right there in the fragile early phase, because they underestimate how fiercely biology, environment, and culture conspire against sustained focus. And that's the invisible war we equip you to win next. Chapter 4. The fundamentals that build real depth. You've made your choice, circled that one quiet path, spoken the commitment out loud, felt that first rush of clarity settling in like fog lifting after a storm. But now comes the moment when most people quietly sabotage everything by skipping straight to advanced techniques or flashy applications, convinced that true mastery lies in complexity when the opposite holds the real power. Depth comes exclusively from obsessing over a handful of basic building blocks until they operate on pure autopilot, turning effort into instinct without conscious thought. You recognize this temptation immediately. After picking your skill, your mind races ahead to impressive outcomes. The TED Talk, the big client, the viral post. So you chase sophisticated strategies or tools right away, only to stumble repeatedly because the foundation wobbles under pressure, leaving you frustrated and doubting the whole path just when momentum should accelerate. What nobody warns you about is how skipping these core fundamentals doesn't just slow progress. It makes elite performance impossible. no matter how many hours you log, because your brain simply can't wire excellence without thousands of perfect repetitions on the simplest elements first. Warren Buffett provides the perfect example of this truth in action, spending his 40s and 50s when most investors chased hot tech stocks, market timing tricks, or complex derivatives promising outsized returns, narrowing relentlessly to one deceptively simple framework: buying wonderful businesses at fair prices and holding forever, drilling those basic blocks of financial statement analysis, competitive moat evaluation, and management quality assessment until they became unconscious reflexes sharper than any hedge fund algorithm. While Wall Street polymaths flitted between quantitative models, sector rotations, and leveraged bets hunting alpha everywhere, Buffett looked deliberately average for decades, repeating the unglamorous fundamentals of reading annual reports cover to cover, calculating intrinsic value by hand, and ignoring short-term noise until those basics compounded into a fortune others called luck, when it was nothing more mysterious than depth in the simplest moves executed flawlessly every time. He didn't invent new theories or leverage genius-level math. He mastered 10 core questions about any business so completely, the complexity dissolved before his pattern-recognizing brain, turning investing from stressful gamble into predictable arithmetic through nothing but sustained obsession with bedrock principles. But hold that thought, because this obsession with basics runs counter to everything modern learning teaches. And understanding why your brain resists it unlocks the acceleration waiting right now. Picture the concert violinist who doesn't practice Paganini caprices first thing, but spends the opening hour on open string scales and long tones until intonation becomes molecular memory. Or the NBA free throw king who shoots thousands of identical form checks before game simulations. These aren't warm-ups. They're the myelin-building repetitions where effortful control transforms into effortless flow, wrapping neural insulation around motor pathways until skills fire 10 times faster under pressure. Your brain craves this too, but evolution wired you for novelty-seeking survival, where sampling multiple tools increased odds against starvation. So today's abundance floods you with shiny advanced tactics while starving the deliberate practice needed for myelin sheaths to thicken. The biological upgrade that separates conscious struggle from unconscious dominance, where obstacles barely register. Without these core blocks internalized, breath control for speakers, grip fundamentals for golfers, listening cadence for negotiators, higher skills collapse like houses on sand, which explains why smart people plateau forever while quiet obsessives lap them through boring repetition that compounds invisibly for years. You feel this resistance building already, don't you? That inner voice dismissing basics as too simple for someone my age, or beneath my experience level. When nothing unlocks greater returns at 45 than returning to fundamentals with mature eyes that spot nuances 20-somethings miss entirely. Culture reinforces the trap too, celebrating flashy innovators who demo AI tools or viral hacks while ignoring the quiet depth builders who outlast everyone through accumulated perfection in bedrock moves. The copywriter who rewrites headlines 300 ways before audience testing, the salesperson who rehearses objection responses until instinct overrides hesitation. Skipping creates a vicious cycle where shaky foundations breed inconsistency. Inconsistency erodes confidence, and confidence gaps invite distraction back in. Embracing basics flips it to virtuous momentum, where daily 20-minute sessions stack myelin like compound interest, shortening plateaus from months to days while turning pretty good into quietly commanding presence others can't ignore. And here's the multiplier for where you stand now. Life experience lets you accelerate this faster than ever, internalizing nuances like emotional timing or contextual adaptation that raw youth overlooks. Now imagine applying this yourself. taking that chosen skill from Chapter 3 and distilling it ruthlessly to 3 non-negotiable core blocks. Then feeding your brain the repetition it hungers for to build automaticity that frees mental bandwidth for creative leaps later. But most test this halfway and quit when boredom hits. So let's make it stick from day one. Here's what you do today, not tomorrow, when motivation might dip. Grab 10 minutes right now and break your chosen skill into exactly 3 core fundamentals. The simplest building blocks that support everything else. If public speaking, make them breath control from the diaphragm, vocal projection without strain, and strategic pausing for emphasis. If writing, sentence rhythm variation, active voice dominance, and 1 core editing pass for clarity. If sales, qualifying question sequencing, objection pivot phrasing, and close confirmation language. Write them large on a single page where you'll see daily, then pick one. Just one, and practice it exclusively for 20 focused minutes before this day ends. 10 minutes slow and perfect checking form against a mirror or recording. 10 more at speed building muscle memory, no distractions allowed, because these first reps signal your brain to start myelin production immediately. Tomorrow, rotate to the second block same way, cycling daily through all 3 while tracking 1 metric per session. Breaths per minute steady, words per minute clear, pauses landing precisely. And by day 7, you'll feel the first whispers of automaticity, that effortless hum where conscious effort fades into flow. This isn't drudgery. It's laying the neural highway your future self races down without breaking. Those 20 minutes daily plant unbreakable depth where others skim surfaces forever. But 90% abandon right here when the novelty fades and repetition feels endless. Turning potential dominance back into dabbling unless you master the art of finishing what you start perfectly. Chapter 5. Why you quit at 90%. And how to finish. You've laid those core fundamentals, felt the first tingles of automaticity humming through 20-minute sessions. Watch small metrics tick upward like compound interest starting to wake. But now hits the silent killer that derails 90% of quiet mastery journeys right here. Reaching 80 or 90% completion on a project, task, or practice set. Then relaxing prematurely because your brain mistakes almost done for victory. Abandoning the final polish that separates good work from the quietly unbeatable kind others can't ignore or replicate. You know this pattern intimately. Diving deep into a proposal or presentation, hitting the home stretch where the big ideas land perfectly, then rushing the last review or edit because urgency whispers, "Ship it now," only to discover later a overlooked typo, weak transition, or half-baked close that undermines everything before it, leaving competent results that never quite dominate. This isn't laziness or poor time management. It's a wired dopamine glitch where your reward system spikes at visible progress milestones, but flatlines on invisible finishing touches, quietly sabotaging dominance unless you rewire completion itself. James Dyson embodies the opposite. Spending 5 straight years and 5,127 failed vacuum prototypes in his 40s, not quitting at 80% functionality on each iteration where suction worked decently and design looked promising, but pushing ruthlessly through to 100% refinement on cyclonic separation airflow, dust containment seals, and trigger ergonomics until the 14,000th tweak birthed a machine that disrupted Hoover's empire overnight. While engineers across Britain chased flashy features like bagless gimmicks or power boosts promising quick market wins, Dyson obsessed over full-cycle completion, testing every near success to destruction, iterating final assembly tolerances, polishing user flow until suction never faltered under real-world dirt loads, turning prototypes from pretty good into unbreakable dominance, not through genius leaps, but relentless finishing that made competitors obsolete. Most celebrate his breakthrough as invention magic. Few see the real edge, refusing 90% satisfaction for the compounding power of fully realized execution repeated across thousands of cycles. But here's where it gets truly revealing. This 90% trap stems from your brain's ancient completion bias, evolved for survival, where stopping a shelter at good enough conserved energy for hunting or fleeing, now hijacking modern work where partial finishes feel rewarding enough to trigger dopamine while starving the prefrontal polish that elevates average to elite. Picture drafting a key email. Subject hooks, body persuades, call to action lands. Then hitting send without one final read aloud because completion itch scratches, missing the awkward phrasing or missing attachment that costs the deal. Or practicing guitar scales flawlessly through 20 reps, then skipping cool-down stretches because session done. Letting micro-tensions build into injury months later. Constant near finishes train your neurology for premature closure, eroding confidence through repeated small failures, while full completions flood sustained dopamine pathways, thickening those mile-in highways for future sessions where polish becomes instinct rather than afterthought. Culture worsens it too, glorifying MVPs and done is better than perfect mantras that reward shipping sloppy over refining dominant, ignoring how quiet finishers quietly lap everyone by delivering work so complete competitors chase shadows. You sense this happening right now in your chosen path. That urge after 20 minutes of solid fundamentals to call it good session and scroll news, when one more perfect rep or quick review cements the gain forever. Especially critical at your stage where life demands efficiency and experience spots, polish opportunities youth overlooks entirely. Partial quits compound destructively too. One unfinished proposal weakens negotiating posture. One half-polished presentation dims leadership aura. One dropped practice set slows mile-in accrual, creating a vicious erosion where doubt whispers, "Maybe this path isn't for me," precisely when full finishes would build unshakable proof. Reversing demands, redefining completion, not when main work ends, but when you've reviewed ruthlessly, stress-tested edges, and returned to ready state with lessons logged. The full cycle awareness that turns sessions into unbreakable compounds. And here's the multiplier nobody mentions. Mastering finishes accelerates everything else, because complete cycles free mental bandwidth from regret loops, letting depth compound without drag, while partial quitters spin wheels forever chasing fresh starts for dopamine fixes. Now let's install the full set rule that rewires this permanently. Because seeing the trap means nothing without daily enforcement turning knowledge into instinct. Here's what you do today. Before another 90% session steals tomorrow's momentum, pick 3 current tasks or practice sets tied to your quiet path, from that email draft to tomorrow's fundamental block, and commit to the full set rule. No stopping until 100% complete. Meaning main work done plus full review allowed. Error hunt with fresh eyes after 5-minute walk away. Stress test under worst case. Read to skeptical friend. Play back recording critically. And log 1 lesson in 3 sentences before declaring victory. For practice, finish all 20 reps perfectly even when fatigue whispers quit. Then add 2 bonus polish reps slower than ever, checking form against your metric. For work, after drafting, sleep on it, then rewrite the weakest 10th before sending. Track 3 full sets today. 1 small task, 1 medium project, 1 practice block. Marking each with a bold check only after polish. And by evening, you'll feel the dopamine shift from partial highs to sovereign satisfaction that hooks deeper than novelty ever could. Tomorrow scale to 4, building the reflex where finishing becomes non-negotiable like breathing. But beware, because external chaos waits to fracture even ironclad focus unless protected deliberately. That full set habit forges quiet dominance, where others settle for competent forever. But the world bombards chosen paths with interruptions designed to shatter attention. And surviving that noise demands the next level of protection we build together. Chapter 6. Building the unshakable focus for life. You've wired the full set habit. Felt that sovereign rush of completions stacking day by day. Watched your fundamentals sharpen into quiet weapons that competitors can't replicate. But now hits the real battle that most people never expected. External chaos crashing against your focus in ways large and small. From criticism that lands deeper than it should, to sudden failures that whisper, "Maybe this path is wrong," to others succeeding faster elsewhere. Triggering those comparison spirals that erode commitment right when your depth needs to root deepest and strongest. You know this struggle intimately because it shows up everywhere. One sharp comment from a colleague that stings for days, a plateau week that tempts you toward shiny alternatives from podcasts and friends, family demands fracturing your sacred practice blocks into frustrated fragments, all conspiring to shake your resolve precisely when unshakable focus separates true masters from lifelong almosts stuck in potential. This isn't about tougher willpower or more motivation. It's about building an internal anchor so solid that external noise becomes background hum while your chosen path compounds untouched and undisturbed. Vera Wang faced this exact crucible in her 40s when she walked away from Vogue, where she'd spent 15 years as a senior editor shaping fashion icons and trends that millions followed, to start a bridal gown business at age 40 in an industry dominated by established names and younger tastemakers constantly chasing what's next. Everyone questioned the decision. Her family doubted it. The fashion world dismissed bridal as limiting, a niche that couldn't build real empire. Competitors spread attention across ready-to-wear lines, accessories launches, seasonal collections promising quicker validation and broader markets. But Wang narrowed ruthlessly to wedding dress fundamentals. Perfect silhouette purity, fabric drape that moved like water, emotional resonance built through subtle strategic detailing rather than obvious flash. She endured prototype failures where seams split under movement, client hesitations about unconventional necklines she believed in. Years of quiet studio work while peers collected magazine covers and runway applause she once assigned. Feedback came constantly. Some cuts stung, but she treated each piece as data about her craft, not judgment about her worth. That distinction changed everything. She built dominance not through trend chasing, but through depth no competitor matched because she'd learned to separate criticism from identity. But hold that thought because there's a mechanism here that your brain naturally resists. The reason unshakable focus feels almost impossible at first, yet unlocks everything once you understand it. Picture this. Criticism arrives on a project you've poured yourself into. Your nervous system floods with adrenaline instantly. That's ancient wiring from survival days when threats meant fight or flight, when staying calm meant death. Your mind wants defensive reaction, wants to explain, wants to prove them wrong, wants to protect the image you've built. But here's where trained focus diverges from reactive emotion. You pause. Take 3 deep breaths, in for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. Notice the feeling without judgment. Discomfort rising, defensiveness pulling, doubt whispering. Then extract one useful data point buried in the noise. Maybe the phrasing was unclear, maybe the timing missed the mark, maybe there's one legitimate insight worth integrating. You take that thread, you leave the rest, you return to your fundamentals untouched. The emotional turbulence continues underneath. That's normal. That's human. But it no longer controls the work. Your mature wiring actually excels at this way more than you realize. Decades navigating relationships, career setbacks, real consequences teach pattern recognition that spots genuine threats from ego bruises instantly. You've lived through enough to know the difference between valid feedback and someone else's bad day projected onto your work. That wisdom is your edge over younger people starting out who overcorrect everywhere. Taking every comment as gospel, changing direction constantly, never settling into depth because they haven't learned discernment yet. You have. You're learning to use it for focus instead of just survival. You feel the shift emerging already in small ways. When doubt arises, execution continues steady. Plateaus hit, but sessions complete at full intensity. Comparisons flicker across your mind, but commitment deepens in your bones. This isn't rigid denial of emotions or pretending challenges don't exist. It's fluid navigation around them, letting feelings flow through without steering the ship. Logging reactions after sessions end so you refine without mid-flow disruption, breaking momentum. Culture fights this relentlessly, though. Social media rewards outrage cycles. Hustle culture celebrates burnout as badge of honor. Public figures crumble dramatically for sympathy and engagement. None of that builds quiet dominance. Masters dwell in a different zone entirely. Immune to external noise because internal compass runs so steady it barely registers the storms. Decoupling accelerates your compounding too. Emotion-free reps hit harder. Feedback loops tighten faster without defensiveness filtering truth. Plateaus shorten as neutral observation spots breakthroughs hiding inside frustration. And at your stage, 40s, 50s, this multiplies exponentially. Wisdom instantly discerns signal from noise, conserving energy others waste on drama while stacking depth others envy silently from distance. This takes training, not strength. Training always feels strange at first. Here's your daily anchor that makes this permanent, starting today, right now before another wave tests you. After every practice block or completed task, sit for 5 minutes of intentional reset. Breathe in slow for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 6. Then ask yourself aloud in the mirror these questions without rushing through. What emotion actually arose during that work? Name it clearly without judging whether it was right or wrong. Now, what one useful data point serves my path forward? Extract that single thread. Everything else you release. For criticism arriving, receive it fully without interruption. Write down your defensive reaction if anger rises. Don't suppress it. Let it exist. Then wait a full 24 hours before responding or integrating anything. The delay matters because your amygdala needs time to quiet. Then extract core signal. Integrate it silently into next sessions without announcement or explanation. For comparison traps when others succeed, notice the pang honestly. Write 3 ways your accumulated depth exceeds their surface visibility in ways they'll never know. Then return to fundamentals within 5 minutes. For interruptions, fragmenting your blocks, protect one sacred 20-minute window daily with phone silenced completely, door closed, communicating to others. This block builds my future. Join me after it ends. Enforcing this boundary without apology, because protected time compounds exactly like practice reps. Track 3 anchor moments today. 1 after session, 1 feedback moment, 1 distraction defense. Marking each with anchor held, only after execution continues untouched by emotion. Tomorrow add 4th. Pre-session 2-minute visualization where you rehearse chaos hitting, criticism, doubt, distraction. Then feel your focus holding steady like mountain, unmoved by wind. Because unshakable focus lives in rehearsal, not just theory. That anchor forges the fortress where quiet mastery actually thrives across decades. But noise still penetrates through every wall unless your daily environment becomes deliberate ally rather than obstacle. And that's the systemic protection we design together in the next chapter. Chapter 7. Quiet Mastery in a Noisy World. You've built the anchor that holds steady through life's inevitable storms. Criticism no longer derails you. Failures become data instead of defeats. Comparisons spark curiosity about depth rather than defensive envy. But all this internal work gets tested constantly by an environment designed to fragment attention, where notifications ping relentlessly, where everyone around you measures success differently, where the culture of noise makes quiet focus feel almost like rebellion against the way things are supposed to work. The truth most never discover is that external silence matters as much as internal anchor. That protecting your chosen path requires deliberate environmental design, not just mental toughness, because even the strongest focus erodes slowly when surrounded by constant interruption disguised as opportunity or connection. You feel this pressure everywhere. Workplace expecting immediate response to emails, family asking why you're always working on that same thing, social feeds screaming that everyone else is building empires faster through multitasking and visibility, making your quiet focus seem almost selfish or unambitious when it's actually the opposite. Think about Anna, a woman in her mid-40s working in corporate finance who decided at age 42 to quietly master something nobody in her circles valued: documentary storytelling through photography. While colleagues chased promotions through visibility and networking, while friends posted productivity hacks and side hustles across platforms, Anna created something radical. She carved out sacred space, phone off limits in her home office. One evening weekly at a community center darkroom, same time, no exceptions. Weekends photographing the same neighborhood continuously for 2 years instead of traveling to exotic locations for impressive social content. She told almost nobody what she was building. No announcements. No milestone celebrations shared online. Just steady accumulation of technical mastery, compositional depth, narrative voice that compounded silently while others debated her choices. 3 years later, a small gallery noticed her work. A magazine assignment followed. Then a book, The Quiet Path That Everyone Questioned, became undeniably exceptional. Not because she was more talented than peers, but because she protected her focus from the noise that dismantles everyone around her. But here's what makes this work: understanding that quiet mastery requires environmental architecture, not just willpower or discipline. Your brain consumes roughly 90% of its energy managing inputs. So every notification, every conversation veering into your chosen skill, every well-meaning interruption drains the fuel tank needed for depth-building reps. Evolution never designed your attention for this volume. Your ancestors faced maybe 1 or 2 genuine threats daily. Now you're bombarded with thousands of attention requests hourly, each one triggering the same survival alarm that evolved to keep you alive. That's not weakness. That's biology being hijacked. The masters who dominate quiet paths aren't superhuman. They're just ruthless about environmental design, building buffer zones between chaos and focus, like medieval castles with moats and walls that slow attack rather than resist armies. What's brilliant about your stage is that 40s and 50s taught you what actually matters. You've learned which conversations feed you and which drain you. You've discovered which environments bring out best thinking and which ones fragment it. You've lived through enough to design life toward those truths without apology. Younger people still negotiate with others' expectations constantly, still feel guilty protecting time, still doubt whether their path deserves full commitment. You don't have those doubts anymore, or at least you know they're just old programming worth ignoring. That's not arrogance. That's wisdom earning its due. Building quiet zone doesn't require dramatic life changes. It requires intentional small architecture that compounds like your reps. It means one space where your skill lives fully. Maybe a corner office, maybe a homeroom, maybe shared studio space. Where tools stay visible and ready. Where returning takes seconds, not negotiation. It means protecting one sacred time window daily, where your phone exists in another room, where you communicate in advance that this block builds your future and requests wait after. It means identifying 3 people who genuinely support your depth, maybe 1 person total if that's honest. And updating everyone else that you're simplifying focus, removing yourself from group chats about unrelated topics, responding slower to emails that don't serve the path. It means designing your information diet ruthlessly. No scrolling research rabbit holes disguised as learning. No staying current on trends tangential to your fundamentals. No news feeds keeping you informed about everything except your own growing expertise. Here's what you do today, right now, before the noise convinces you this is selfish or impractical. Walk through your home and identify your quiet zone. One corner, one room, one space where your skill comes alive most naturally. Spend 20 minutes removing everything that doesn't serve. The pile of unrelated books, the work emails visible on screen, the remotes and chargers creating mental clutter. Add what serves. Your 3 core fundamentals written large. Your tracking metrics visible. One inspiration image or quote that reminds you why this path called to you. Tomorrow, protect one 20-minute window in your calendar with a label only you understand. Architecture, or foundation, or whatever code reminds you this time, is sacred. Communicate once to household or office. I'm protecting this window daily for focused work. Urgent only. Test it. Notice resistance from others. Notice your own guilt trying to resurface. Don't negotiate. Don't over-explain. Consistency teaches respect faster than words ever can. By week 2, that zone becomes sanctuary, and that window becomes non-negotiable ritual. Not because you forced it, but because your brain recognizes the signal and settles into flow state faster every time. Track days where you protected both zone and window. Count them like reps, because environmental architecture compounds identically to practice. That quiet zone becomes your fortress against the noise constantly trying to fragment what you've built. But the battle intensifies when external rewards disappear and only internal compass remains, which is when most people quit thinking their path was wrong. Chapter 8. Surviving the boring middle. You've protected your space and your time, built the fortress where quiet focus compounds undisturbed, created the anchor holding steady through external storms, wired the fundamentals into your bones through thousands of perfect repetitions. But now arrives the cruelest test that stops most people cold. The boring middle, where novelty has worn completely thin, where early wins feel distant and distant wins haven't arrived yet, where every session feels identical to the last and your brain screams for stimulation. That mastery simply doesn't provide in these months or years between competent and exceptional. This is where culture actively works against you because everything around celebrates breakthroughs and milestones. The before and after transformations, the sudden victories, the moment someone became good enough to announce. But nobody talks about the unglamorous grinding months when you're alone in your quiet zone practicing the same fundamentals, noticing microscopic improvements that only you understand, questioning whether this path was ever worth the opportunity cost of all those other directions abandoned. Most people quit here not because the path was wrong, but because the invisible middle feels wrong. Because boredom registers as failure instead of the precise signal that depth is finally building beneath the surface. Morgan Freeman discovered this truth deeply when he spent his early 50s driving a taxi in New York City, paying dues for stage roles nobody noticed, auditioning constantly while working nights to cover rent, living years nobody celebrated or photographed or turned into inspirational content because nothing remarkable was happening visibly. The boring middle for him lasted decades. Small theater parts, character roles in forgettable films, years of competent anonymity where mastery was accumulating in private but producing zero external validation or recognition. Everyone around him moved on from acting aspirations by their 30s and 40s. Freeman kept showing up to auditions, kept taking supporting roles that paid nothing near leading parts, kept building his craft through character work most actors dismiss as stepping stone rather than destination. By his 50s, he was still essentially unknown outside theater circles. By his 60s, the tide shifted and roles aligned with depth he'd accumulated silently. But those intermediate decades, the boring middle stretched across 2 decades instead of 2 years, separated him from everyone who quit because waiting felt pointless. He wasn't more talented than peers who abandoned acting. He simply tolerated the invisible middle longer, understanding somewhere deep that boring accumulates into remarkable eventually. But here's the mechanism that makes sense of why boring feels so intolerable to your wired modern brain. Understanding the valley of boredom transforms it from evidence of wrong choice into proof of right depth building silently. Your reward circuits evolved for immediate feedback. Kill animal, eat meat same day, find berries, taste them immediately, build shelter, sleep safely that night. Your brain flooded dopamine constantly because effort produced visible results in hours or days. But mastery operates on different timeline entirely. Weeks of identical practice yield zero visible change. Months produce minor shifts only you recognize. Years finally surface the exceptional results everyone notices. Your ancient reward system interprets this as failure. Dopamine plummets, motivation evaporates. The path that's actually working perfectly registers as broken because feedback lag exceeds attention span you were wired with. This isn't weakness or lack of calling. It's neurology colliding with delayed compounding. And the cruel irony is that boring middle signals exactly when depth is building fastest. The plateaus aren't obstacles to mastery. They are mastery constructing itself invisibly. What saves you at your stage is knowledge that boredom isn't emergency. You've lived enough to recognize patterns, relationships that felt flat for years before deepening suddenly. Skills that seemed stuck before breakthrough, careers that looked stalled before pivot. You know from direct experience that invisible compounding is real because you've lived it multiple times. Younger people reaching boring middle often surrender because they haven't accumulated enough life evidence that persistence pays. You have. Use that. Boredom is information that you're exactly where depth gets built. Not evidence you chose wrong, not signal to pivot, not problem requiring solution. Just the tax you pay for exceptional results nobody else bothers paying. Daily practice through boring middle requires one shift. Measuring progress differently than your dopamine system demands. Instead of chasing breakthrough feeling or waiting for visible results, you measure microscopically. Did breath control hold yesterday better than 3 months ago? Did phrasing clarity improve on one specific element? Did focus time extend even 5 minutes longer before fatigue hit? These don't generate excitement. They generate quiet satisfaction that your brain eventually learns to crave once it adapts to delayed reward. The trick is making this process visible enough to maintain thread, because invisible progress erodes motivation even in people committed to paths. You need one simple tracker. Not elaborate productivity system, but something small. A calendar where you mark reps clean, or boring session completed, or whatever language resonates. Looking at 30 days of unbroken marks compounds psychologically, proving to your brain that boring isn't waste. It's accumulation. It's exactly how masters get built. Here's what you do today. Before boredom convinces you something's wrong with the path. Create one simple tracking method. Paper calendar on wall. 3-word entry after each session. Fundamentals solid. Micro improvement logged. Boring paid. Whatever grounds you in microscopic progress. Review it weekly, not for motivation, but for pattern. 30 days of sessions means 30,000 repetitions. Your nervous system now runs faster. 90 days means your competitors quit 3 times over. Every mark proves invisible compounding working exactly as science predicts. Simultaneously, reduce every other measurement for these boring months. Stop comparing your progress to anyone else's highlight moments. Stop refreshing metrics waiting for breakthrough. Stop asking, "Am I good yet?" The answer doesn't arrive during boring middle. The answer arrives after boring middle, when world finally notices what you've been building. For now, just mark the calendar. Just show up. Just trust the invisible. That's harder than any reps physically, but lighter than quit feels. Track 7 days this week. If you survive boring middle without abandoning path, everything after becomes manageable. That boring middle either breaks your resolve or forges your dominance. There's no middle ground. And those who survive it enter the next phase where quiet expertise finally becomes visible enough to compound beyond individual practice. Chapter 9. Scaling your quiet expertise. You've emerged from the boring middle, survived months or years when boredom whispered that the path was wrong, when every session felt identical, when dopamine abandoned you completely. But you showed up anyway. You marked calendars. You trusted invisible compounding. And now something has shifted. Your fundamentals operate so smoothly they barely register as effort anymore. Conversations in your domain reveal knowledge others don't possess. Small requests start arriving from people who noticed your quiet depth building while they weren't looking. This moment, where expertise becomes undeniable even to you, creates a new temptation that destroys as many quiet masters as early quitting. The urge to suddenly announce yourself, build a platform, monetize what you've built, transform private mastery into public empire because the world finally shows interest and you've earned the right to capitalize. But here's the truth that separates those who maintain dominance from those who destroy it through visibility. Quiet expertise scales through a completely different mechanism than fame or platform requires. Growing exponentially, not by broadcasting, but by deepening reputation through direct application and selective teaching. That compounds trust rather than follower counts. Think about Julia Child, who spent years teaching cooking privately in Paris before publishing Mastering the Art of French Cooking at age 51. Not racing for celebrity or social visibility, but quietly becoming the person everyone in her circle consulted for food knowledge and technique they couldn't find elsewhere. She didn't build a personal brand. She didn't chase TV appearances initially. She became exceptionally useful to people who encountered her work directly. A cookbook so thorough it educated an entire generation. A presence so grounded in real mastery that when television eventually came calling, it arrived because producers recognized genuine expertise, not because she'd manufactured audience demand. Her empire grew from depth outward, not from visibility inward, the opposite trajectory of most modern success stories, where platform precedes actual skill and credibility follows numbers rather than preceding them. By the time she became famous, she was already unquestionably exceptional, meaning her public prominence couldn't diminish her because it rested on solid foundation of years spent becoming truly, measurably good at her craft in ways that mattered to people who actually cared. But here's what makes this distinction so critical for your next phase. understanding that scaling quiet expertise requires two entirely different skills than building it initially. Creating mastery demands repetition, anchor holding, boredom surviving. Scaling mastery demands teaching, application, selective generosity that compounds through different pathways. Your quiet depth makes you valuable to others, not through selling it to masses, but through becoming the person experts consult, the mentor others seek, the problem solver competitors call when situations exceed their ability. This happens naturally when mastery deepens enough because scarcity and excellence create magnetic pull that needs zero marketing. People find you. People ask you. People pay attention when you share because your track record proves your thoughts aren't theoretical, but tested through thousands of hours of real application. The trap most fall into is thinking they need to amplify visibility to scale impact. Building podcasts, launching courses, starting newsletters, when what actually scales is deepening the expertise further, while selectively teaching those worthy of time. What's brilliant about your stage, and this phase specifically, is that 40s and 50s gave you wisdom about who matters and who doesn't, which relationships feed growth and which drain it, where time multiplies impact and where it disperses into noise. Younger experts often make scaling catastrophic by teaching everyone indiscriminately, spreading energy across unqualified students, building platforms that require constant feeding and maintenance stealing from the depth that made them valuable initially. You won't make that mistake. You know how to say no. You know how to protect core time. You've lived through enough to recognize which people might actually integrate your knowledge and which ones just want permission to stay comfortable. That selectivity is your edge in this phase. Here's what becomes possible now that your fundamentals have fully rooted. You start solving real problems for real people using accumulated depth nobody else possesses. And those people become your case studies, your testimonials, your quiet proof that what you built actually works beyond theoretical mastery. You teach one person at a time something complex they couldn't learn alone. You solve one client problem that larger competitors can't quite address. You become known in your domain by people who matter, not as celebrity, but as problem solver, expert, reliable source of usable knowledge. This compounds faster than followers ever could because each person you help becomes your advocate. Telling others because you helped them solve something they cared about deeply. This is word-of-mouth scaling, where expertise precedes and pulls opportunity toward you, rather than noise chasing visibility trying to manufacture demand. Here's what you do starting today. But carefully, because this decision shapes everything forward. Identify 3 people in your immediate circle. People you respect, people you trust. People who genuinely care about growing in your domain, rather than just collecting credentials. Reach out to one this week with a specific offer. Teach them the 3 core fundamentals you've mastered so thoroughly. One focused session where you show them what depth actually looks like when practiced ruthlessly. Don't charge money yet. Don't build a business model. Just teach one person excellently and watch what happens. Notice if they integrate knowledge or discard it. Notice if they want depth or quick shortcuts. Notice their follow-through and commitment. That one session teaches you everything about whether this person deserves your continued mentorship or whether your time is better spent elsewhere. Based on that, you'll know whether to teach them further or politely decline future requests so your deep time stays protected for the worthy. Do this for 3 people across 3 months if you choose to scale at all. Let each experience teach you who integrates your expertise and who just wants famous person connection. By month 3, you'll understand your scaling mechanism clearly. Whether teaching matters to you, whether application-solving client problems calls to you more, whether staying in solo depth actually satisfies you best. Track these 3 experiences. Notice which one energized you. Notice which one felt like obligation. Your answers become your path forward. That selective teaching and application transforms private mastery into quiet dominance that extends across decades and touches lives far beyond your individual practice. But only if you protect depth zealously while scaling impact conservatively. Chapter 10. The Long Game of Staying. Exceptional. You've built quiet expertise that extends beyond your individual practice, taught selectively, solved problems real people cared about, proved through application that decades of depth created something genuinely valuable that others can't quite replicate. But now arrives the final challenge that most masters face, and many fail. Understanding that mastery isn't a destination you reach and defend forever, but a daily practice that requires constant recommitment, because the moment you assume you've finally arrived is the moment your edge starts eroding silently. You know people like this. Specialists who dominated their field for years, then suddenly became irrelevant because they stopped practicing their fundamentals, stopped evolving their understanding, assumed past dominance, guaranteed future relevance. Staying exceptional decades into your path requires completely different mindset than building it initially. Not chasing growth or improvement anymore, but practicing sustainable depth that can continue indefinitely without burnout. That actually deepens with each year of accumulated experience, rather than diminishing like most careers do when people coast on accumulated reputation. Grandma Moses discovered this truth in her 70s and 80s, when most people would have retired completely. She started painting professionally at 78 after spending her entire life on farms, raising 10 children, managing difficult circumstances with practical resilience nobody photographed or celebrated. She could have retired. She'd earned rest after 7 decades of relentless work. But instead, she committed to a completely new domain with beginner's humility, painting daily scenes from rural memory, continuing for over 20 years into her 90s, until she'd created over 1,000 paintings that filled galleries and homes and became American folk treasure. What made this extraordinary wasn't just late start. It was that she never stopped. She didn't reach good enough at 85 and rest. She kept painting daily, kept exploring compositional variations, kept showing up like fundamentals still mattered urgently. At 99, she created her last painting. At 101, she died. The final decades of her life proved that staying exceptional doesn't require chasing anything, just returning daily to what you've built, respecting it enough to never take it for granted, practicing with same humility you brought when you first began, even after thousands of paintings proved your mastery beyond question. But here's the mechanism that explains why staying exceptional challenges even proven masters. Understanding the psychology of undefending. Once you've dominated a domain for years, once others acknowledge your expertise, once you've scaled impact through teaching and application, your brain naturally wants to coast because the safety cycle activates. You've already proven yourself, so why risk more effort when reputation is secured? Evolution rewired you for survival once threats disappeared. Relax muscles, conserve energy, enjoy the feast you'd earned. This worked fine when dominance meant permanent status in stable societies. But expertise in modern world compounds or declines. There's no plateauing at exceptional level indefinitely. Either you keep deepening and integrate new understanding into your fundamentals, or you gradually become the expert who's just repeating techniques that younger practitioners have evolved past. The temptation to rest is honest and understandable. The cost is invisibly devastating. What makes this phase sustainable rather than exhausting is fundamentally different structure than the building years required. Building demanded intensity, focused blocks, protected time, meticulous practice of core fundamentals. Sustaining demands integration. weaving practice into daily life so it continues naturally without forced devotion, treating mastery like breathing rather than project that requires willpower. You've lived long enough to know the difference between sustainable rhythm and burnout hustle. Building fundamentals required sprint phases. Staying exceptional requires marathon pacing that actually feels easier because it's woven into identity rather than imposed from outside. 1 hour daily for decades outlasts 5-hour days for 5 years because humans sustain rhythm better than intensity when they're operating from vocation rather than obligation. Here's what becomes essential in this final phase. Returning to your 3 core fundamentals annually, not to practice them, but to remember why they matter at all. To integrate lessons learned through application back into your technique. To ensure that 10 years of teaching hasn't subtly corrupted the purity of what made you exceptional initially. The best way to stay excellent is to practice alongside those learning it now, not to teach from distance observing others fumble with basics. This keeps your understanding fresh, reminds you constantly of elements that seemed obvious but require attention, prevents the expert's slow slide into theoretical knowledge disconnected from lived application. It also provides what humans crave without admitting: continued growth that sustains engagement indefinitely. Mastery isn't boring once you're deep enough. It's endlessly generative because each year reveals new dimensions to fundamentals you thought you'd mastered completely. Here's what you do starting this month, regardless of how far into your path you've traveled. Schedule 1 day monthly where you return to your 3 core fundamentals and practice them as if you were beginner again. Not executing perfectly, but approaching with curiosity about what you might be missing, what younger practitioners might be discovering that you've overlooked, what elements you've taken for granted. Write 3 observations about each fundamental. What still excites you about it? What challenge arises when you practice vulnerable rather than expert? What question emerged that your mastery hasn't quite answered yet? This isn't remedial. It's the antidote to calcification. Do this consistently, and in 5 years, you won't be the expert who peaked at 45 and coasted through 50s. You'll be the expert who deepened through 60s and beyond because you never assumed a rival. That return to beginner's mind sustains exceptional performance across decades when everything else would fade, transforming mastery from achievement into a lifelong way of being that compounding never stops accelerating. Conclusion: your quiet mastery starts today. Everything we've explored across these 10 chapters, from the trap of scattered learning to the invisible power of boring middle, from building unshakable focus to sustaining mastery across decades, circles back to one simple truth that changes nothing and everything simultaneously. You're not untalented, not too old, not missing discipline. You were just unfocused in a very specific, invisible way that kept your effort from compounding into the quiet dominance you always knew was possible. The culture around you celebrates breadth and visibility, and constant reinvention, flooding you with messages that mastery lies in knowing many things well. Building platforms, collecting credentials, but mastery actually lives in the opposite direction entirely. In knowing fewer things so deeply that obstacles dissolve. In protecting your path from noise rather than broadcasting it. In showing up daily to practice fundamentals most people skip because they're convinced they're already past that stage. You've spent years becoming competent across multiple domains. You've built credibility. You've proven you can learn. That foundation actually positions you perfectly for the shift nobody teaches. Taking everything you know and funneling it into one quiet path where your accumulated maturity becomes your unfair advantage over younger competitors who are talented but haven't lived enough to know what truly matters. The choice before you isn't between comfort and growth. It's between the slow erosion of staying average across everything or the accelerating dominance of choosing one thing and going deeper than you've ever gone before. One requires nothing from you except continuation of current patterns. The other requires one decision made today and recommitted to tomorrow and every day after. Here's what you do before this book ends, and life pulls you away into noise and distraction and 1,000 good reasons to delay. Take out pen and paper or open your phone's notes app, whichever feels real to you, and write down the one skill where pretty good already exists. The path that called to you across these chapters. The area where quiet mastery feels possible even if it seems distant. Don't overthink it. Trust what emerged while reading. Write it in one sentence. I choose, insert your skill, for the next 90 days minimum, letting all other learning go completely. Read it aloud. Hear yourself commit. Tomorrow, break it into 3 core fundamentals and spend 20 minutes on one. Then 10 minutes reviewing what you learned and where you stumbled. Then 2 minutes visualizing tomorrow's session. That's it. 93 minutes that build compounding momentum most people never access because they're waiting for perfect clarity or complete readiness or the right time that never arrives. You know in your bones that exceptional lies waiting on the other side of boring consistency. You felt it your whole life, that knowing that mastery is possible if you just stop spreading yourself so thin. The fact that you read this far proves part of you recognizes the path forward. The question now is whether you trust that knowing enough to act on it today instead of tomorrow when conviction fades like it always does. Quiet mastery isn't a secret. It's not some special gift reserved for the young or the talented. It's simply what happens when someone makes one choice, protects that choice fiercely, practices the fundamentals until they become automatic, finishes everything completely, holds steady through storms, builds environment that supports rather than sabotages, survives boredom by measuring microscopically, scales impact through selective teaching, and returns annually to beginner's mind so depth never stagnates. This is available to you, right now. In your 40s or 50s, when life experience finally makes dominance accessible instead of just theoretically possible. The only requirement is choosing one thing and respecting that choice enough to see it through the boring middle when doubt whispers loudest that you should have picked something else. Everything you've built over decades, your resilience, your maturity, your hard-won wisdom about what matters, was training for exactly this moment. Not to stay comfortable, not to prove yourself again to people who doubted you, but to finally build something so quietly exceptional that it speaks for itself and you never have to defend it again. Your quiet mastery starts today, not tomorrow, not when circumstances align. Today. Choose. Write it down. Say it aloud. Do the first 20 minutes before bed. That one decision sets everything else in motion. The boring middle becomes manageable once you've truly committed. The distractions lose power. The doubt becomes background noise instead of voice-driving decisions. The path compounds like nothing else in your life because for the first time, you're pointing all your considerable resources, your maturity, your focus, your years of accumulated learning, in one direction long enough for it to matter. You've got this. Now go build it.